something breaks your reverie. When you come to, you find yourself standing in a dark apartment. You look out the window. All you can see is a snowy night sky illuminated by a single streetlight in the distance. Two things are clear. You appear to be in a Khrushchevka complex of some kind, which is a Russian style of low-cost apartment buildings made during the Soviet era. The second thing is that despite some lights being on in the adjacent building, there doesn't appear to be anyone else around. You are alone. This is how the Russian game Shahada Zima opens. Or in English, it's winter. You explore your apartment and you find many things you can interact with. You can turn on the microwave, eat the food in the fridge, use the oven, and run water from the tap. But if you turn on the radio, this happens.
Будет смерть рядышком, рядышком, редком. Деда за бабой, мама за папой, сестричка за братком. Милый мой мальчик, лодочка, целлофан, Господь твой, иголочка, госпожа твоя, вилочка.
You walk through the rest of the apartment. You find a few tabs of unlabeled medication. You can try to leave, but you need a key, which happens to be on your desk next to a letter, which reads,
There's cotton inside my head. If there's anything to blame, maybe it's winter. The door is shut. I'm not waiting for anyone.
You leave. As you walk down the distinctly Eastern European stairwell, you try knocking on your neighbors' doors, but no one ever answers. You walk outside into the cold night and begin wandering around the courtyard. Again, there's nobody and nothing. Outside the complex is an endless forest that also has nothing for you. You notice the light at the opposite end of the courtyard. You walk towards it and you find that it's actually a lit sparkler, but it quickly burns out unspectacularly and everything is once again dark, quiet, and lonely. You see, this is a very different kind of horror. There's no spider-like creature climbing the walls of these apartments, and there's nothing terrifying waiting around the corner to jump out at you. In Shahada Zima, there's no danger of any kind. Just the crushing loneliness and melancholy of winter in a Russian Khrushchevka. As you keep playing, you almost start to feel an odd sense of urgency. You start exploring the map more frantically, trying desperately to make anything happen, to try to force some sort of conclusion to this experience. But there just simply isn't an ending here. The only thing you can really do in this game, other than uncovering a few small Easter eggs here and there, is exist in this depressing slice of Russian life. Shahada Zima was created by Russian artist Ilya Mazo, who confirms the listless nature of his creation by saying,
Nothing awaits you. There is no chance to get out. No room for adventure's breathtaking plot.
You see, It's Winter was designed around the idea of Russian sadness, an online aesthetic that revels in poorly maintained grey Khrushchevkas framed by grey skies, pollution, freezing temperatures, and Slavic pessimism. I'm sure you've seen those Russian doomer music compilations on YouTube, which are probably the most popular things to come out of this aesthetic. Some of these videos have tens of millions of views. In an interview with the magazine Wired, Mazo states that It's Winter was never really meant to be a traditional game, but rather, he says,
It's a different world. You've been there before.
And you know what? Maybe I have. Is the experience this game provides really that different than the Canadian suburbs in winter? Sure, you're never going to find an aesthetic out there called Canadian sadness. If anything, we're pretty culturally optimistic, and life in Canada is incredibly easy by world standards. But swap the prefab apartment buildings with prefab townhouses, and the Canadian experience is surprisingly similar to Shahada Zima. Bland, poorly constructed utilitarian architecture framed by an overwhelming amount of snow, endless forests, and a common sense of loneliness. The parallels are surprisingly striking, which makes this game hit all the more harder for me personally. Всем привет! Welcome to part 2 of Horrors on the Russian Internet. Before I get into the next topic, I just want to thank you guys for all the support for the first century of this series. It really means a lot to me. And I'm also very appreciative of all the great suggestions for topics you guys left for me in the comments section. In fact, most of what we're going to cover for the rest of this video are things you guys brought to my attention. So, thanks again. Like I said in the first episode, Europe's easternmost country has always fascinated me. Like how it's also technically Asia's easternmost country. Russia is full of strange facts, and the antagonistic nature of its relationship to the West has given it a permanent aura of mystery and intrigue to me and every other Canadian. And I'm sure you Yanks feel the same way, especially with the USA's, shift in foreign policy. Alright, without further ado, let's dive into the next topic. While It's Winter was a more unconventional piece of horror, the rest of the stuff we're going to cover in this video is more traditional spooky internet stuff. And we're going to start with the most suggested topic from the last video. One aspect of Russia that always seems to intrigue us outsiders is the general secretiveness that seems to surround the country. Whenever a government keeps secrets in a public manner, like Area 51 for example, it always becomes a focal point for the public's curiosity. People never stop speculating what horrible or incredible things the establishment may or may not be hiding in these secret areas that are off limits to all but a select few people. And no country has off-limit areas quite like Russia. As of 2007, Russia has publicly acknowledged the existence of 44 closed cities. These are entire towns and metro areas that are off limits to either foreigners or even Russians in some cases. Many of these places are even completely absent from official maps. It's believed that not only is the true number of sealed off areas in Russia substantially greater than the 44 the government publicly recognized, but that the number of closed cities could have been up to 20 times higher during the Soviet Union. Most of these closed cities usually have something to do with Russia's nuclear or space programs, military, or seaports. At least that's all that's been said publicly. Just like Area 51, people love to speculate just what the Russian government may or may not be hiding in these sealed off regions, and also what closed areas might exist out in the great expanses of the deep country that we might not even know about. Much in that vein, the following video will be uploaded to YouTube on October 19th, 2021.
С началом весны нужно быть более бдительным.
This clip was supposedly made by EMERCOM, Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations. It's a PSA intended for the inhabitants of Magnitoshaktynsk Oblast, a region of Russia that you won't find on any map. The voice in the video reminds viewers to be mindful of the dangers associated with the spring melt, like floods, forest fires, and attacks from the opelai as they emerge from their winter lairs. The PSA suggests avoiding the forest during this time of year to avoid encounters with these creatures, which are depicted on this sign as some sort of humanoid being with long, wavy limbs. In South Siberian folklore, an opelai is a sort of monster that resembles a human being split down the middle, with its one leg and one arm being extremely long and flexible. Supposedly, these creatures wait for travelers in the forest and then jump on their backs and entwine their victims in their long, twisting limbs, choking them out much like a snake would and then feeding on their blood. Being that these creatures only have one arm and one leg, they're quite slow and clumsy on their own. But in some cases, two opelai can attach to one another to form a much more formidable predator, which is so fast it can supposedly outrun a horse. In the unfortunate case of being attacked by one of these creatures, the PSA advises you what to do. The most important thing is to try your best to stay upright, as the opelai usually try to knock their victims to the ground. If you do manage to stay standing, you should then try to grab the creature by the neck and squeeze as hard as you can, as this is its weak point. Doing this might shock the creature into letting you go, at which point you should run immediately. When running, you should try your best to pass by trees as closely as possible, as the opelai will likely get their long, clumsy limbs stuck on them while chasing you. The PSA closes by asking the viewer to report any opelai sightings to EMERCOM immediately. The channel that uploaded this clip is simply called Magnitoshaktynsk Oblast, and it apparently collects and uploads PSAs from the secret region of Russia. The second video on their channel, however, is not a PSA. It's apparently an internal training video for new recruits of EMERCOM, specifically the ones entering the Anti-Acra unit. The training begins with the viewer being asked to pay attention to the following clip. The narrator then tells us that this was a possession test, and that some people who view this clip will have a strong reaction to it. It starts with mild confusion, which eventually grows into outright delirium, followed by spasms, and then finally, loss of consciousness. If you didn't react, however, congratulations. You are mentally fit enough to serve in the Anti-Acra unit. You'll be part of a protective police service that will help prevent and or mitigate encounters between Acratids and people. The Acratids can be separated into two groups. The Pragmats, which are beings that pose some sort of physical danger to people, which would appear to include the opelai based on this illustration, and also Keffels, non-physical entities that can either possess or infect their victims. The video also mentions that the Anti-Acra unit was recently put together as a result of a new declaration made by EMERCOM in 1992, which gives us an idea of when this footage was supposedly made. Now I know what you're thinking, yes, this is obviously just an analog horror series. It's got every trademark. The simplistic bathroom sign art style, the mid-century nuclear war style PSAs warning people of bizarre otherworldly dangers, which are always pretty effective due to the contrast of the mundane bureaucratic style these clips have with the esoteric threats they describe. I personally feel like analog horror is going to be a little oversaturated and definitely doesn't hit as hard as it did 5 years ago, but I still like this series a lot. I love the concept of taking some creepy folklore story and modernizing it into a more relatable and effective format. Mythos has many other videos I'm not going to spoil for you. I'm just going to tell you about my favorite one. This clip is called Sheli, which happens to also be the name of the creature it's describing. This one is another PSA, and it opens by telling us a common complaint voiced by residents of various villages in the region. In the winter, people often hear strange sounds seemingly coming from the roofs of their houses at night. This is supposedly due to the sheli, an incredibly tall humanoid creature that kinda looks like Slenderman if you stretched him out a lot. The sheli apparently stand next to people's houses during the winter nights to warm their hands by the chimney. The sheli in most cases is apparently a benign creature. They're only there to warm themselves up a little during the harsh Siberian winter. But with that being said, if you do find one of these beings next to your house, you should remain indoors, because the sheli will attack you if it gets scared, usually by whacking you on the head with one of its pole-like arms. Now this PSA was supposedly made in 1993, but in 1994, EMERCOM would update their guidelines revolving around the sheli and would also make a new PSA. While these creatures were initially thought to be a relatively low-risk pragmat, meaning a creature that poses a physical risk, they have now been reclassified as a higher-risk Keffel, a non-physical threat. Now, when you hear the sounds on your roof, you must try your best to maintain conscious awareness of your surroundings. If you feel a headache or nausea, then keep trying to maintain a mindful focus and don't let your thoughts drift. Make sure your windows are all shut tight and your blinds are drawn. Don't look outside. After you've ensured all your windows and openings are covered, call up EMERCOM and alert them of the situation. Whatever you do, don't go outside, even if the person on the phone asks you to. And lastly, don't believe anything the voices tell you. I think this is analog horror at its best. Having that first PSA set the expectation that these creatures are mostly harmless, and then following it up with that classic vague list of instructions to avoid some unknowable existential threat is incredibly effective. This is the thing that everyone tries to achieve with analog horror. And man, did a lot of people try to copy this series. Mythos is probably the most popular piece of Russian horror I've covered. They currently have more than 200,000 subscribers and multiple videos with over 1 million views, with that last video we just covered having 3 million. With such a successful series having its fanbase relegated to the limited amount of people that speak the language, it naturally resulted in a ton of copycat videos. It's pretty amazing just how many people have tried to expand the lore of Mythos, but it also makes sense. The art style is very simple and easy to replicate. It's not exactly difficult to put together your own Mythos video. Remember that short clip I showed you at the very end of my first Russian horrors video? That was in fact a video from my Mythos Copycat channel, and it had over 1 million views. I don't even think you can really even call these copycats anymore. If anything, I think Magneto Shotting Skullblast is almost growing into its own shared internet mythos, just like the SCP Foundation or the Backrooms. But the channel that started all is more or less inactive. Their last upload is from August 2024, which is apparently just a slightly modified version of a deleted episode from a couple years prior. In a long comment written on a popular English language video about the series, the creator behind Magneto Shotting Skullblast would comment that their first few videos were more or less just a test of their video editing abilities, and that they kept the series going when it became popular, but eventually began to get bored with it and didn't want to keep the channel going if the quality was declining, which is definitely a sentiment I think most people can appreciate. By the way, the video that this comment was left on was made by horror YouTuber Mouldered, and it's definitely the most comprehensive English language video about this series that currently exists. It was invaluable in the production of my video for its translations, and if you want to dive deeper into Magneto Shotting Skullblast, I highly suggest checking it out. I think these community-driven shared mythologies are one of the more positive side effects of the internet and social media. Whether it's found footage of the Backrooms, lost Slenderman videotapes, or in this case, forgotten TV segments, which is also what our next topic happens to revolve around. For a while now, I've been searching for the perfect wallet. I've tried big bulky ones that make me look like I have a brick in my pocket, and tiny flat ones that can barely hold anything. Nothing has ever felt right. That is until I tried the Extra wallet. I've been using the Extra wallet for a couple months now, and I can honestly say it's the best and most well thought out wallet I've ever used. I'm not exaggerating. It's got a few easy access pockets for my frequently used cards, and also this neat little interior card holder to store all of my cards that I don't use as often, which also doubles as a fidget toy with a satisfying button. The Extra wallet somehow manages to do all of this while still being surprisingly small. But if I want something even smaller, then you'll see me with my tiny Extra Card Holder Pro, which can hold up to 14 cards and a wad of cash in its cash strap. I barely even notice that this thing is in my pocket, but I'm also not worried about losing it because I've also got Extra's Finder card, which is the world's slimmest waterproof Apple Find My card. All I've got to do is load up the Find My app, and I can see exactly where my wallet is. Extra is currently running an anniversary sale until March 31st, and they're offering discounts up to 30% off. But if you go to partner.extra.com/feral and use code feral, you'll get an extra 10% off, making it an even 40. Thanks to Extra for sponsoring this video. The following video was uploaded in September 2021. The title describes a broadcast hijacking of a local Russian news channel, which apparently aired something called Kingdom of Heaven. The video starts with some backstory to the incident. The uploader says that they discovered an archival recording of a Kingdom of Heaven segment from their hometown in the early 90s, which was previously considered lost. Although the segment had aired before they were born, it still seemed oddly familiar to them. They decide to show it to their parents, who said that they might have a recording of the original segment on a VHS tape somewhere in the basement. The OP grabs the tapes from their house and gives them to a friend to digitize. And lo and behold, the Kingdom of Heaven segment was on one of them. According to the OP's parents, the recording would have been made sometime between 2003 and 2006. This is what it showed.
Эти кадры были сняты сегодня на улице Попова. И таких опасных пируэтов...
As you can see, this broadcast hijacking appears to show us some eerie televised obituaries, the first one being for an infant named Vera. There's a number of hidden and bizarre things about this clip. After the screen of text describing Vera's death, some static begins to fade in, and some picture of a man wearing a medical mask appears to just barely peek through the noise. And on top of that, just for a brief moment, we get another screen of text that we can just barely make out. This one reads,
After several days of searching, Vera was found when neighbors began complaining about a strong odor coming from a clogged garbage chute. Her body was discovered among the layers of moldy garbage.
We get more of that incomprehensible staticky mess, and again, another hidden screen of text that just barely comes through over the noise.
The cause of death was determined to be blood loss due to laryngeal hemorrhage. Small fragments of crystal glassware and remains of semolina porridge were found in the stomach.
Semolina porridge is a popular baby food in Russia, and also, obituaries don't usually go into such detail as to how a person died. In the second obituary, it almost seems like a piece of text is missing, and that's because part of the story is almost unreadable due to wild tracking and noise. This one reads,
On the evening of the unfortunate day, upon her husband's return home, Svetlana took the car and left in an unknown direction. Soon after, her husband discovered that their daughter, money, and his wife's documents were all missing.
After this, we get a kind testimonial, presumably from the husband, saying that they'll meet again in heaven. But instead of the "we remember, we love, we grieve" post-text like we get in the first obit, this one instead eerily says,
I hope you die, bitch.
After this, the local news seems to fade back in, and that's when the tape ends. According to the OP, his parents had originally planned to record a news segment filmed at his school that he might have appeared in. His parents thought that the hijacking was probably just some sort of malfunction, either with the TV or the news station. OP back then, merely just a child, was slightly frightened by the hijacking, but luckily didn't read the inscriptions too closely, and his parents didn't let him watch the recording after. According to the OP, no information about this hijacking can be found anywhere. Not on the internet, and not in any sort of local news archives. He ends the video by asking if anyone has any more information. This video is completely earnestly presented. Nowhere does the uploader give any sort of indication that what we're watching is a work of fiction. And, in fact, these Kingdom of Heaven obituaries were supposedly a real thing in Russia in the 90s. As much as it might look like analog horror, these obituaries would apparently sometimes air between TV shows in early post-Soviet Union Russia. The one you're watching right now is supposedly real, and the text here is much more normal for an obituary and isn't describing the violent circumstances of someone's death. This is just so eerie and ominous. The cheaply recorded orchestra, the monotone palette, the way the music cuts off abruptly and the bells play, I honestly can't believe that what we're watching isn't someone's analog horror project. Most of these Kingdom of Heaven segments are considered lost media. According to a Russian page on the Lost Media Wiki, there were supposedly up to 150 segments made in total between 1991 and 1994. What's interesting here is that while we have many recordings of these supposed obituaries, none of them have ever actually been confirmed to be real, and many of them have actually been proven to be fabricated. And the fact that the first mention of this even existing being in an ImageWare post from 2017 is also pretty suspicious. While some commenters say that either them or their parents do remember televised obituaries appearing on Russian TV in the 90s, nobody seems to have any proof of this, and the network that supposedly aired these segments has denied their existence as well. And by the way, that supposedly real segment we just watched, a Russian YouTuber recently confirmed that it was fabricated, which kinda leads me to believe that everything here is fake, even though it's listed on Wikipedia. I will say though that if these are all actually fake, they are still incredibly well done. These videos actually look like they were legitimately recorded on tape. This is really a step above the average VHS effects you typically see in analog horror. And apparently, like every other Russian horror thing we cover, Kingdom of Heaven also became a meme format that people have already turned into shitposts. I'm still curious though. If you're Russian, do you think that there's any chance of something like this legitimately existing? Let me know in the comments. Alright, we're gonna move on from a probably fake creepy classic TV thing to something very real. One thing I find interesting on the internet are the communities that have developed specifically around old home video logo bumpers. Like those short little 2-second clips with the production company's logo you'll see before your DVD or VHS gets to the main feature. There are communities completely centered around compiling, telling the history, and even remixing these old home video logo bumpers. Some of these videos have millions of views. One common aspect you'll notice in the logos community is the idea that some of these logos are scary, which I guess I don't really understand personally. I'm guessing it has something to do with childhood memories of being freaked out by them, but regardless, horror seems to play a fairly big part in this strange niche, and a lot of these logo remixes seem to revolve around making a logo bumper scarier. There is one logo though that I do find pretty uncanny, and of course it's Russian. Yeah, if I saw this as a kid, it would definitely freak me out. The statue head looks like something you would either find in some ancient Chinese tomb or some horror claymation movie. The music also seems really out of place for a logo bumper like this. It sounds more like the sort of thing you would hear before a battle starts in a turn-based RPG game. The logo is for a Russian television company called Vid, which has been around since 1987. The logo, being as striking as it is, must have been a major success for the company because no matter what article about Vid I read, there was always a lengthy section just about the logo bumper. The logo is created by Andrei Raspash, and he based the face off of a ceramic sculpture of Chinese philosopher Guo Xiang that featured a 3-legged toad on top of his head. This sculpture is owned by the Museum of Oriental Art in Moscow, and apparently they tried to sue the production company over their usage of the sculpture, so Andre and his team had to digitally alter the features of the statue to make it look different enough from the original sculpture, which I suppose had a hand in making it look as uncanny as it does. The logo was basically immediately seen as frightening and off-putting. The company quickly began receiving many complaints from the parents of scared children, so over the years they've had to continually alter the logo to make it look less creepy. Of course, this logo is a pretty big Russian meme nowadays. You can find countless parodies and remixes on YouTube, and interestingly enough, it seems to have found its way into the Western logo community as well, with many prominent logo YouTubers making videos about it, which I guess might lead one to think that the logo community is not only based around nostalgia. And thus concludes today's brief walk through the seemingly endless trail that is Russian internet horror. We'll definitely be returning soon enough for a third part, because there's still a ton out there that we haven't covered yet. I think for part 3 I might look at some more mysteries rather than just horror fiction, but if you guys have any suggestions, please leave them below. I read every comment on my last video, and I'll read every comment here as well. And if you're still watching this far into the video, maybe consider subscribing. And if you want to support the channel, we just launched a Patreon last month where you'll find some exclusive content. Alright guys, spokojnej noci.